The next slide, basically, when I was in consulting, I worked for a big five firm for a number of years, and we had what we called project management threads. Project management threads were basically something that a project manager had to pay attention through at every project phase. So on every phase, you had to manage scope. On every phase, you had issues to manage. You had schedules and budgets, and you had risks to manage. But there was very little mention of managing knowledge transfer. For example, most training strategies I've ever seen in so-called project charters talk about the beginning of the process, team training, and they talk about the end of the process. But there's very little discussion at all about what goes on in between. The point is, knowledge transfer requires planned cycles of learning. You need some form of deliverables to set expectations and also manage progress. The first thing you got to do are these prerequisites, because if you don't do these correctly, it's probably not going to happen. You got to assign your best employees to the project. Your doers, your go-to people. You know, every organization has these type of people, or you wonder how they stay in business. I don't buy the fact that organizations, clients don't have knowledgeable people that can participate and learn this stuff. The main thing you can't do is sell their abilities short. As far as knowledge transfer goes, you have to be available for knowledge transfer. You know, a consultant or no one else can transfer knowledge to a client that is not available. I always say, hey, your team has to be committed to the project on average 4 days a week, on average. You start slipping below that number, and you know there's not going to be a lot of time for knowledge transfer. The consultants are doing a lot, and it's going to become a consultant-driven project. If you look hard enough, get creative, you can free up the resources. Because what I have seen is when management really wants something to happen, guess what? They find ways to make it happen. If they're really committed to the project, and I believe most senior managers are, I think the biggest thing about senior management commitment is a failure of project management to educate them and coach them, because they don't actually sign off on multi-million-dollar projects because they want them to fail. I think a lot of it's a project management issue. But the point is, when they want something to happen, they can make it happen. As far as your consultants go, I would not hire a consultant that has not implemented that module at least 3 times. And the reason is because software is flexible. It takes 3 different accounts before you really start to fully appreciate the flexibility of the application tools. If you do one implementation, you know, you're not going to really understand how you can use all the tools in the system. There's 2 types of consultants. There's coaches and there's doers. And they're really totally different breeds. There's a lot of consultants that come in, they hit the ground, they configure the software, they test the software, and they're out the door. Knowledge transfer is not a priority. They don't even like doing it. While other consultants are really good at coaching, communication, and delegating tasks. That's the kind of person you want. And also, industry experience is very important because, again, that's knowledge as far as the proper application of the tools within your industry. The final prerequisite, you got to set the right expectations. Ultimately, the client is responsible for learning the software. This is a paradigm shift for a lot of clients. Their attitude is the consultants have to spoon feed me. If I want to be around for it, that's fine. But if not, the onus is on them to transfer it to me. Not really. The client should take responsibility for that. The consultant certainly helps facilitate it, along with other training sources. You've got to delegate someone to become the in-house application expert. Someone on the team, on each application team. It could be the functional analyst, could be a really strong IT business analyst, but you have to raise the bar. You have to expect something to get something. Schedule an early exit for your consultants during the project, meaning, how about at the end of the design phase, we start phasing out the consultants to become, an as-required resource. Now, obviously, when you can do this is a function of the quality of your team, how much they're learning, the pace of the learning, because obviously you don't want to do anything stupid. But the point is, a lot of times consultants can disengage, so to speak, a lot sooner than the go live. They can disengage during testing. They could disengage during the construction phase. They could disengage during the design phase. I've seen that and I've done that. So it is doable. The key for the client is setting the expectation that in order to do those things, you need to understand the data in the system, the files, the fields, and you need to understand the configuration settings, or be well up to speed where you can actually, crest those curves before you go live. Getting started, I always recommend formal training right up front. You need to do training on the fly during the project. That's happening. That's part of knowledge transfer. But you need to do the formal training. Formal is defined as a classroom environment, predefined lesson plan, predefined data, training scripts, supporting materials on the current release, and experienced trainer. The thing to be aware of is many consulting firms are not equipped to do this, not equipped to carry out formal training as defined. I'm not saying all of them aren't, but I'm saying a lot of them aren't. Typically, your best training sources are going to be a third-party provider or the software vendor. And we talk a little bit more about that next. Okay, why formal training? Well, you need to lay a solid foundation. You need to have the breadth of knowledge of what the basic capabilities are. And if you don't have that, it's kind of like building a house on quicksand. You're going to kind of do it on the fly. And I'll tell you what, being a consultant, when you sit down with the client and you do informal knowledge transfer, those discussions turn into a whole bunch of things. They're not just about knowledge transfer. They turn into a requirement definition discussion. You talk about design. You talk about business issues. You talk about how they do business today. It's just a mixed bag of hit and miss unless there's really a focus to focus just on training. But a lot of times that doesn't happen that way during the project. The biggest issue is this: never underestimate the time and cost for an application consultant to put together a custom class for a client. I've done it before. It takes at least 3 or 4 days to develop materials, configure the system to meet the requirements of the training, loading data to support all the training scripts, and that's even before you actually do the class. Formal training discourages customizations. Now, everybody's probably doing a little customization to their class. We don't want this topic, we want this. I'd even be careful with that because, quite frankly, that early in the process, you don't know what you're going to use. There may be some obvious things, but you may go out and say, hey, look, you know what? I don't need lot control. I don't need serialization of parts. You can skip all that stuff. Well, I was on a project one time. We didn't think we needed that either, but we ended up being very creative with why we needed it. We actually used the functionality. The thing about it is training is training. It's not a demo. It's not a premature design session or testing session. Quite frankly, we don't know what to test. We haven't designed it. We have no idea what the requirements even are. The focus should be on learning. Another point, which may not seem like a big deal, but when you're sitting in a class and it's disrupted because the software doesn't work and the whole class gets disrupted for half an hour, is when you're trying to configure a system for training uniquely because you're trying to customize a class or you're trying to do this on the fly, some type of formal training on the fly, you're going to make setup issues. There could be setup issues. You don't have a chance to test everything. I've been in classes before where the classes have been disrupted. Hey, guys, why don't you guys go out and take a smoke break? Because we're going to have to fix this problem. It's going to take 30 minutes to do it. Another issue is many consulting firms do not have access to the latest material associated with the latest release. Okay, when it comes to team training, there's a way you can waste money or there's a way you can make it very effective. The first thing is don't send cast of thousands to team training.